Happy Tuesday, Year 4, and it is your English slides that you're joining me for this morning or afternoon. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of research ready for our great debate on Friday. Because I can research a class in Roman times. I'm not talking about beach or maple class. We're going to be looking at something a little bit different today. So we're doing this for a number of reasons, and we're going to get straight on with it too. Guess who's back? Our thoughtful emojis come back again, and he wanted to consider who were the plebeians and patricians. Now, some of you might not know this and be going, what are these things? Are they Pokemons? No. But if you're unsure, that's fine. But pause it for a minute, because you might want to share some of the ideas, and you might find out they match up in a minute. So pause the video, have a think, come back to me shortly. Amazing, right. Oh, hello, Chair. We're going to look now, because we're going to start with plebeians. Now, these are all to do with people in Roman society. Now, in the Roman times, plebeians were a member of the lower social classes in Rome, so generally tended to be poor. We're going to find out a little bit more about them in a bit. Whereas patricians, hopefully you inference if these plebeians were more to do with the poor, then hopefully you've already guessed that patricians are the aristocrat, they're the noble one. They're the ones with more power and more money within the society. Hence why they get to wear that lovely toga and command armies as well. So now we know that, we can start looking at patricians and plebeians in a little bit more detail. So, to give you an idea, as mentioned, the patricians here, this little guy over here, they tend to be the wealthier, more powerful citizens in Rome. They were noblemen and women, so they tend to hold much, much more responsible, powerful, important jobs. However, they were a small minority of the population. So to give you an idea of what I mean, we, for instance, are in classes of 29 or 28. It'd be like saying 2 children out of 28 were the patricians and the rest were the plebeians. But those 2 children are more powerful and have more money and a lot more influence over the whole of the class. They want to control, patricians, all aspects of the government. That changed a little bit when Julius Caesar came in, and you'll find out why. And then after 218 BC, they were not allowed to participate in trade or commerce. So basically they had a lot of powers, but not quite as much as the emperor, of course, where you've got to feel for the plebeians because they were the common people. So there were much more of them. They tend to be peasants, so really poor, but they happen to be craftsmen. People would be traders and other workers working on the farms, doing all the harder jobs. They were the majority of the population, so there were 2 children out of 28, as I mentioned, who were the patricians. The rest of you, 26, would be plebeians. You did eventually gain the opportunity to work in government, basically start to make decisions for the class or for society, but not many. And only Romans who could be traders, so many became wealthy. Interesting fact at the end there too. But it starts to give you a breakdown. Because today, we're getting some research ready for the great debate on whether we think patricians were more important or whether we think plebeians were more important. On the slides here are the side that you're going to be focusing on. So Maple, you are going to be focusing on the patricians. Beach, we are left with the plebeians. So we need to get to an understanding of who these people were and what their lives were like. So with that in mind, and with this arrow doing its job, there we go, want to give you a quick reminder. Because we're going to be note-taking today, we're going to do this in a couple of ways. Firstly, I'm going to read a set of text out to you. You can make notes on this. Secondly, I'll leave a few little links that you can look on to extend that knowledge. But to remind you, when you're making notes, please keep it short and to the point. All right, I don't want all these bursting adjectives for once. I want you to really make concise points that tell me, like a little summary, what you've learned. Pick out any information that relates to the question that you might be asking. Cut some words out so we can lose those adjectives for once, and I mean for once. And remember, if it's not answering a question that you're going to be answering or asking, then it's not worth making that note. So, time to get your research sheet ready. It's saved, of course, on the daily planner as your Tuesday English activity. So make sure you have that ready now because we're going to be moving on. Thank you, Arrow. Right. So, to give you an idea right now, Roman society were divided into 2 main classes. You have got these slaves. So powerful, they made the whole thing move. A vast majority of the population were slaves, but we're not going to be focusing on them. Again, we're looking at patricians and we're looking at the plebeians. And basically this little triangle shows you the numbers of different groups and who had the power. So the orange, the patricians, are at the top, they have all the power. But as you can see, patricians, there's more of them, but they're not quite up there as well. And then the slaves, loads of them, but they weren't classified as citizens. Basically, the Romans didn't really see them as people. As we know, they can be quite rotten, those Romans. So, patricians, as I mentioned, they are at the top of society. They were the ruling classes and were always Roman citizens. So they had rights and could do whatever they wanted in that respect. They were very wealthy and made up a very small percentage of the population, as I said. And these people could trace their ancestry, so trace their family back all the way to the founding of Rome. Whereas plebeians, they were the working class. They generally lived in very crowded, basic apartments, and most plebeians were either soldiers, farmers, bakers, builders, or craftsmen. They were also usually Roman citizens, so they did share the fact they could do lots of things like vote and join in with things in common, whereas slaves didn't. So hopefully you're starting to make some notes now. So, we're now going to explore in more detail the typical jobs or roles that plebeians and patricians had. Now remember, Beach, you're doing the plebeians, Maple, you're doing the patricians, so only make notes for the group of people that relate to who you are focusing on this week. So, if you're in Beach, you might want to fast forward until that changes to the word plebeian, because right now we're focusing on the patricians, which is to do with Maple class this week. So Maple class, make sure your ears are peeled, your pens or pencils in hand, and you're making notes. So, to give you a sort of job that a patrician could have, the most obvious, of course, would be the emperor. A plebeian, they were not significant enough, they were not important enough to be able to rule the Roman emperor. Because if they were, you had to be someone so amazing who could rule the whole Roman Empire. That includes the government, the people that make decisions, and the army, of course, who were full of plebeians. They were the supreme leader and were occasionally thought of as a god. A basic plebeian would not be held in such high esteem. The emperor was the leader of not only the Senate but also the church, so controlled religion, and he could decide to inflict punishments upon people and stop any acts by anyone there pretty much. The magistrates are the courts. They were very rich, some of the most richest people in the Roman Empire, and they lived a life of luxury. You can only imagine the sort of apartments, all the marble arches, all the fantastic mosaics. They would have had their own pools. They would have had access to their own toilets as well. So basically lots and lots of amazing things from that particular job. Patricians could also be senators, and these were a group of men who helped and supported the emperor. Again, patricians, you can see it's all about importance, all about power. They're the ones that made the important decisions in Rome. They were wealthy, once again, and they were upper class and from powerful families. You could not just be a plebeian and make your way up to patrician. You had to be born in that family. It was a very prestigious and highly respected position. So like your footballers today, or your TikTokers, or your YouTube influencers, that are those of today there as well. They would hold great influence and people would look up and want to be like them. Once you became a senator, you held the position for the rest of your life. And then, although senators didn't get paid, it was still considered a lifelong goal of many Romans to become a member of the Senate. Basically, these people had so much money in their family, so much power, they could work for free because it made them so influential, because they could control the decisions of the emperor. Only as well, senators could wear a purple striped toga and special shoes, because purple is a very hard colour to find. Got to do lots of mixing there as well. So purple is a colour of the rich. Still very much seen that way today in some cases. Going on again, you have the equestrians, and these were wealthy, shall I say, members of society who would focus on business, create jobs, run things really well. They were businessmen, and of course they became very wealthy. They could have jobs such as tax collectors, bankers, exporters, doing a lot of work with money, and some would have been in charge of roads. They wouldn't have been building the roads, they would have been the ones going, this is how it's built, design this Knights Trade Road, get me from Londonderrium to Colchester. My dear plebeians, patricians, again, all about power. Right, Maple class, that's your time to pause for now, because we're now on to the plebeians. So I will see you in a bit, Maple class. Maybe fast forward towards the end of the video when you stop seeing this at the top of the slides. And hopefully Welcome back, beach class. Right, we're going to focus on the roles and jobs of plebeians right now. So they could predominantly be soldiers or legionaries. And most plebeians who wanted to become soldiers had to be at least 20 years of age, and they would have to serve for 25 years. And they were not allowed to marry during this time, so you were committed to the army. 25 years! Can you imagine that? Some of the teachers at this school aren't even 25 years old. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. It's crazy to think of that long, but that is how long they've been part of the army. They weren't paid for their work, which is great, although it was really hard. And they would have to walk up to 24 miles a day wearing heavy armour, those sandals, and carrying heavy equipment. To give you an idea, that would be like travelling from Trowbridge to Bath and back. A long way to be walking. They learned to fight, they were trained to build bridges, set up camp. They basically did all the jobs that the rich and powerful plebeians didn't want to do. But without the jobs, without the soldiers, Rome would have fallen. So they were heavily important people, the plebeians. They took up the jobs, particularly the army. Remember, the Roman army are the ones that conquered and built on the Roman Empire. Think about how important the plebeians are with that knowledge in mind. Plebeians too, here we go. So plebeians in general, they tended to be working class, as we mentioned. They were people who had little wealth. That means they had little or no money. As you can tell by this guy's quite interesting choice of haircut. They didn't really own any land, but they did work really hard. They were really hard workers. As I mentioned, plebeians were critical for Rome and for making it run. Without plebeians, Rome would have fallen a lot quicker than it did. So they would do things like farmers, bakers, merchants, craftsmen, lawyers, teachers, and entertainers. So basically, they're doing the roles that were so important that if they didn't do, people wouldn't learn things, crops wouldn't be built, and you wouldn't have had quite a nice loaf of bread there as well. So, and if you were a child of a plebeian, you would not have gone into education more than likely. You would have learned a trade as their parents in a similar manner there as well. And you tend to live in crowded apartments called insulae. Basically, the whole family being there, there'd be not much room. You might have to share a bed with a brother or sister as well, which isn't nice. It'd be dirty, it'd be grubby, there'd be lots of little animals in there as well. Of course, if you were a patrician, big houses, villas, swimming pools, all the things. So plebeians did not have it as good as the patricians. And I'll breathe. Right, so that's giving you some notes there to kind of get an idea of who the plebeians and patricians were. Do check out the links that are on the slides here. They'll give you a little bit more extra information if you need. And I will see you all tomorrow, Year 4. Take care.